One of the ideas that or concepts that I was trying to explain about computation is that when you have a computer, you the computer has electrical activity that occurs. Just like your brain is a computer. It holds and processes information. It essentially functions the same way as a Turing machine, except in slightly different ways, because we have emotional intelligence as humans, which is debatable whether computers have that besides the human brain or animal brains. So in computer science, you can think of it that if one region goes down, the other region goes up, but it goes up into a manic kind of upper arousal from a normative level. So when you think about the theorem statement, the part that is going down, the arousal that would be there is equal to the compensated excess arousal in the other region of the brain that has a equal and opposite function that's compensating in addition to the activity that is already there, such that that activity, that arousal, would normally be normative, or it would be at whatever arousal rate is perfect for that person to maintain homeostasis. And so you can think of how this metaphor also applies to not only Ferrari engines and psychology, but to economics. And you can also think of this, it's very similar to the theorem, if not the same, or an extension of it, explanation-wise, as when Archimedes put different materials into a bath, where if you have something that's a denser object, it will take up a different amount of space versus something that isn't as dense. And so that's one of the ways that we can measure different elements, density, and things like that. And so you have one tube and another test tube, and you put something in it, and even ravens have this level of intelligence, and they've been shown to do that with intelligence tests. They understand this difference in the density of objects, and it's one of the things they use in order to get resources. And so when you look at the black market, there are some factors that play into that, but I'm looking at a very generalized and more of a pure model than the actual complete model that you would need to build. But this principle of compensation, where it's much like sensory deprivation, where one sense will compensate in addition to its normal activity for the lack of arousal in that part of the brain or that functioning sense, such as touch or hearing versus seeing, or hearing versus seeing, or whatever. And there might be small compensations in certain types of minor functions in other regions of the brain that would happen in addition, but there would also be a primary function that would replace it. And so sometimes these compensations can be very particular. And it's a survival mechanism as far as how computers work, because otherwise, if you're not processing the information, you're having dysfunction or lack of function. So when you think about this principle in terms of black market economics, one of the ways that I like to think about this in regards to, if, let's say, the U.S. is in a recession, we have a global economy. So every nation does something that compensates for, in an economy as a whole, for the losses or the recessions or depressions in other nations in that free market economy, even if there are things that we do to control that economy from a government stance. And so the interesting thing that I would say is that if there's a recession in the US, you could algebraically prove when you look at the percentages of activity in the black market trade versus the trade in the public stock market or the public market in the US, as far as things like supply and demand and stuff like that. Take the drug cartels, for instance. Drug cartels would essentially compensate with black market activity for the recession in the US, if we were in one. The same thing would happen all around the globe, that parts would do that. But Mexico, drug cartels in Mexico and several other countries, they're right on our border, and they're in close continent, to ours. And so when things like the slave trade, sex trade, drug trafficking, organ transplants, exotic pets, those criminal activities, and the money that's generated by them that is active in the economy balances out for the recession or lack of activity or the poverty in the larger, or probably smaller, but the public market. And so when we're in a recession, the crime goes up. When we're not, crime goes down, would be the assumption. There is another factor, and that is that things like drugs or addictive products would already have a effect on that would exceed that formula, but that's the general formula. There are a lot of particulars that you would have to hash out if you actually studied that model. So it's kind of the how you would state the theorem if you were going to prove this on a general scale or mathematically. But, yeah.